If you asked most hotel leadership teams where the revenue gap is, the answer would be some version of we need more bookings, better occupancy, higher IDR, more visibility on the channels. This framing isn't wrong, but it's incomplete because there is a different revenue gap. One that exists not in the demand you're missing, but inside the calls you're already getting. Every booking call your team takes, every inquiry that comes in and gets handled, revenue that was available in that conversation and wasn't captured. Not because your team failed, not because the caller wasn't interested, because nobody asked. My name is Daria. I spent a lot of time looking at call operation in hospitality and healthcare, specifically at what happens inside calls, not just where the calls get answered. The upsell gap in hotel reservations is one of the most consistent findings across operations of every different sizes. And it's consistent for a specific structural reason, not a training problem, not a motivation problem, a design problem. There is a version of upselling that most hotel teams rightly want nothing to do with. The aggressive push for a room upgrade the guest didn't ask for. The hard sell on the breakfast package before the booking is even confirmed. The feeling as a caller that you've called a sales floor rather than a hotel. That version of upselling damages the guest relationship. It creates friction at a moment that should feel straightforward and pleasant. Most hotels have consistently or not decided they don't want to do that. And that decision is right. But it's led in many operations to a different default. Don't mention anything the guest didn't ask about. Close the booking. Move to the next call. The myth is that there are only two options: aggressive upsell or no upsell. There aren't. There's a third version. Relevant, low-pressure service that gives the guest information they'd want to have at the right moment in the conversation. A couple booking a weekend room mentioned that it is their anniversary. A guest asking about check-in times who hasn't asked about dinner reservations. A corporative booker securing rooms who hasn't asked about the meeting room. There are not sales moments, there are service moments where a brief, well-timed mention of something relevant creates value for the guest and revenue for the hotel. Most calls contains at least one of them. Most calls end without them being addressed. Let's be concrete about the typical booking call. A guest calls. They want a room for specific dates. The receptionist checks availability, quotes the rate, confirms the booking. The guest says thank you. The call ends. Total duration 3 to 4 minutes. What happened in that call? A transaction was complete. The guest got what they came for. The reservationist did their job correctly. The call count for the day goes up by 1. On any metrics being tracked, this was a successful call. What didn't happen? Nobody mentioned the restaurant. Nobody asked whether they'd like a late checkout, edit. Nobody noted that the room category one up from what they've booked is available at just £30 difference. Nobody asked whether they need a taxi from the airport. Were all of those relevant? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the guest. But nobody found out because the goal of the call implicitly was complete. Booking and move on. Hotels lose revenue already inside the property, not from lack of demand, from lack of execution. The booking happened. The room is filled. The revenue from this room is secured. Everything that might have laid on top of it, the dinner, the upgrade, the experience, all sorts of add-ons, that revenue was in conversation and it left with the caller. Before anything else, this is not about staff not caring. Most reservationists in the hotel care generally about guest experience. The ones who don't upsell are not being lazy or indifferent. There are 3 structural reasons this happens. None of them are about individual motivation. First, call volume pressure. When you're handling a high volume of calls, speed matters. The mental mass, conscious or not, is the faster I close each call, the more calls I can handle. An upsell attempt adds time to the call. At volume, that time multiplies. Reservationists who work in busy environment develop a rhythm that is efficient and fast. Upselling breaks that rhythm. Second, no feedback loop. If a reservationist declines to mention the dinner reservation and the guest doesn't have dinner at the hotel, there is no signal that connects 2 of those events. The reservationist doesn't know what the guest did after hanging up. There is no data point that says on this call you had an upsell opportunity and you didn't make it. The only feedback that exists is when something goes wrong. Missed upsell opportunities, they don't show up on the feedback. So the behavior that produces them never gets corrected. Third, no reminder, no visibility, no standard. Most hotels don't have a systematic point at that call, a natural scripted moment when the upsell happens as a matter of process rather than individual initiative. It's left to the reservationist to find the right moment, assess whether it's appropriate or not, and decide to do so. Under call volume pressure, with no feedback and no standard, the decision is always easy, skip it. Not because staff don't care, because in the moment it's easier to skip it. No reminder, no feedback, no visibility, so the default becomes silence. The missed upsell problem persists in most hotels for the same reason missed after-hours calls persist. It leaves no trace. A booking call that completed without an upsell looks identical in every system to a booking call that complete after a successful upsell attempt. Both shows as a handled call. Both shows as a confirmed booking. The only difference is the revenue that didn't get added. That revenue doesn't appear anywhere because it was never part of the booking. Missed upsell moments don't appear as red flags. They look like normal calls that solve the problem but left value on the table. Your call recordings, if you have them, shows a call that was handled professionally. Your CRM shows a confirmed booking. Your revenue report shows the room rate. The dinner reservation that wasn't made, the upgrade that wasn't offered, the late checkout that wasn't mentioned. None of those appear. They're not failures in any report, they're just absent. This is why most hotels underestimate this problem significantly. The visible metrics looks fine. The invisible gap accumulates quietly at scale across every call and reservation team takes. A mid-market hotel in London. Reservation team takes, say, 60 inbound calls per day. On a conservative estimate, 40 of those are booking or booking adjacent calls, guests who've made or confirmed a booking, or are inquiry about one. How many of those 40 calls contain a natural upsell moment? Not a forced one, but generally relevant one. Realistically, most of them. Now, how many of those moments are being used? Based on what most hotels report when they actually audit their call recording, a small minority, often under 20%. What's the average value of a successful upsell? It varies significantly by property, but dinner for two, a room upgrade differential, an airport transfer, this is set between £30 and £150 range individually. If 15 of those 40 calls daily had a relevant upsell moment, and only 3 of those moments were being used, and the average successful upsell was about £60, that's 12 missed opportunities per day at £60 each. £720 left on the table. In a year, it's more than £260,000. From calls you already taken, from guests who called you. Revenue that was in the conversation and walked out with the caller. These numbers are illustrative. The actual figure depends on your call volume, your upsell mix, your conversion rate. But the direction is consistent. At scale, the upsell gap in hotel reservation is not a rounding error. The reason this doesn't get fixed in most hotels is the same reason most call handling problems don't get fixed. There is no feedback loop that connects the behavior and the outcome. A reservationist who consistently closes calls without upselling attempts receives no signal that this is happening. The call handling metrics looks fine, they're answering calls, completing booking, maintaining handle time. There is no report that shows missed upsell rate. There is no coaching session built around here are 3 calls from this week where you had a natural dinner mentioned and didn't use it. The feedback that would change the behavior doesn't exist, so the behavior doesn't get changed. Building this feedback loop is a management challenge. It requires call monitoring, structural coaching, and consistent standards. Most reservations teams don't have the bandwidth to do this systematically alongside their normal call volume. This is a design problem, not a people problem, not a training problem. A system that produces good calls measured by their own metrics, with no signal what's being missed inside them. 3 things I want to take you from this video. First, the upsell gap in hotel reservations is not about pushy sales tactics. It's about relevant, well-timed mentions that create value for the guest and revenue for the property, and that are consistently not happening on most calls. Second, missed upsells are invisible. They don't appear on any report or the loss. The call looks successful, the booking is confirmed, the gap in the revenue that could have been made, but wasn't. Third, the cause is structural, not motivational. Speed pressure, no feedback loop, no standard moment in the call. Those are the reasons, not individual performances. Call is a paid touch point. We're using 0 of its upsell potential. That's the summary version. My question for the comments. Does your reservationist team have a standard upsell moment built into their call flow? A specific point where certain things always get mentioned? I'm curious how many operations have the systematic versus how many leave it to individual discretion. Drop it below in the comments. Subscribe for more videos like that. New videos coming every week on call operations and the revenue loops that lives inside your existing customer conversations. Thank you and have a nice evening.